Who came up with these theories? Let's look at some economic theories in practice. The first and probably one of the most popular and well-known economic theorists is John Maynard Keynes. His theory is considered very liberal. It is based on fiscal spending or using government money on projects to inject money into the economy. He definitely believes that government can intervene and save the economy by spending money. He also believed in increasing the money supply. In order to check a recession, you increase the money supply so people have more availability to credit and they can spend more money. In this whole scenario, John Maynard Keynes understood that there was going to be deficit spending. In fact, he encouraged this. He said you needed to be more worried about getting the economy back on track and becoming prosperous, even if it means cutting taxes and spending the government money. Again, he believed in cutting taxes. More people employed, more people paying taxes. So you can't cut everybody's taxes. So you could cut everybody's taxes and they'll spend more money. Producers will make more, producers will hire more people, and tax revenues will eventually increase to pay off for the deficit spending that you once were involved in. Once you were done and the economy was coming back, you needed to decrease the money supply and quickly cut spending in order to avoid inflation. John Maynard Keynes was the economist behind the idea of the New Deal, when the government was the only person who could borrow money, or the only entity that could borrow money to get Americans employed in order to check the effects of the Great Depression. When nobody else could hire, the federal government could. Okay. Oh, and increase taxes. That was the other thing. So once you've done the deficit spending, cut taxes, and increase the money supply, once the economy is back on the upswing, you need to quickly reverse that to check inflation. Milton Friedman. His theory is very conservative. The government should not spend to stimulate the economy. He was not a fan of fiscal policy. Instead, he focused on the government intervening through the Federal Reserve controlling the money supply. He did, however, believe in an earned income tax credit. He advised Reagan in the Reagan administration when the Reagan administration pushed Congress to reform taxes and include an earned income tax credit. The idea behind the earned income tax credit is that people who live below the poverty line, instead of giving them bukus of dollars in welfare spending, cut their taxes so they have more disposable income. In fact, don't make them pay taxes at all, income taxes. Just make them pay the payroll tax that'll go into Social Security and give them all of their tax money back, and then they'll have extra money, and then they'll be able to stimulate the economy through spending. He also wouldn't have been opposed to a flat tax, where everyone is taxed one rate. Regardless of how much money you make, you're taxed the same rate. Now, this is different than what we have currently. We have progressive tax. The more you make, the higher percentage the government takes from you. So if you make more money from one year to the next, your tax rate goes up. But a flat tax would just say that everybody would pay, except those getting their earned income tax credit, everybody would pay 10% of their income in tax. The problem with the flat tax is that 10% out of an income of somebody who makes $30,000 means a lot more than 10% out of the income of somebody making $2 million. If you're making $2 million, what's 10% of your income? Not that much compared to 10% for somebody who's making $30,000, where you need every penny in order to make ends meet. Okay. Theories in practice, Reaganomics. The theory is a combo of monetary policy, tax cuts, and cut spending on social welfare. You decrease government involvement and the people will work harder. So let's talk about supply side tax cuts. You cut taxes and you increase the money supply. If you cut taxes for the rich and business owners, They will spend money to hire more people and reinvest in their business. This is what we call trickle down. You give more money to the rich people will eventually have this money trickle down to the not so rich people by hiring them and continuing investing in their businesses. You cut spending on everything except defense. Defense spending actually would increase sharply, partly because we wanted to outspend the Soviets when it came to military to crush the Soviet regime and cause for their collapse. Money supply would be controlled by raising interest rates as a way to check inflation. So there was a lot of inflation at the beginning of Reagan's administration. It was rampant inflation. So we would cut the money supply by cutting interest rates, and people would stop spending so much, at least so much on credit. And then you had to deregulate major industries such as airlines and telephone companies, removing government price controls and allowing them to operate in a free market. Other areas of economic policy, I'll talk about free trade. Okay, free trade means that you will have trade between the United States and other countries without tariffs or without many restrictions. So a free flow of goods without there being any extra cost. Now, the pro of free trade is that you'll have more people to sell our products to. You get more types of products, and when we become interdependent on each other for trade, like we are dependent on China and China is dependent on us, we'll hesitate before we go into get into any conflict with them because we don't want to lose our very necessary trading partner. A con of free trade is that it leads to outsourcing. The free movement of products also means that companies can freely go to those other countries, set up shop, avoid United States environmental regulations and United States wage restrictions, and they can go to countries that don't have those and they can kind of do what they want. We also have this concept of protectionism, which is always the opposite of free trade. Some policymakers want to insulate the United States from foreign economies. They don't want foreign products coming into the United States that might be cheaper than United States made products. They don't want companies to go abroad and set up shop to avoid United States regulations. Protectionism, what you are protecting is your industries at home. So you would put high taxes on products that are coming in from other countries. So you would increase our tariffs on imported goods. Protectionism can lead to a crippling world economy. We used protectionism policy right around the time of the Great Depression, and it halted the world's economy because tariffs were so high and we just bought from industries at home, but that hurt other industries in foreign countries. Why do we care? Well, now we care because we're so intertwined. Our stock market watches what other countries' stock market does, so on and so forth. That's really difficult to get involved in protectionist policy. Sorry. Right. Regulation. Regulation, of course, is the government using regulatory agencies to monitor business practices. Remember, regulation can cost businesses their profit because they have to pay to institute these regulations. We have antitrust laws. These are anti-monopoly laws. A monopoly is a company that dominates a market and won't allow for competition. The Department of Justice breaks apart companies and opens the market up to competition. So you can't have like one cell phone provider or one cable provider in an area. You got to have choice. Otherwise, you have a company that dominates that industry and the Department of Justice will break it up. Okay, subsidies are also a part of economic policy. Subsidies is government money or government spending to help industries stay afloat. So you assist failing industries by loaning them money to keep them afloat, or you just give them money without even expecting them to pay it back. The largest recipient of subsidies are farmers. Farmers get a large amount of money or a huge chunk of money from the federal government so they can make sure that their livelihood is stable in times of flood or drought when they may not produce enough to actually eh, maintain their livelihood. So the federal government gives them money. Public opinion also plays into it. Remember, the economy affects how we vote. If we aren't doing well economically, then we will vote the people who are in office out of office. If we're doing well economically, then they get to keep their job. Some of our economic policy also is, again, this is regulatory, involves protecting workers and consumers. And the reason why we need to be protected is because there was a time or a history in this country that when companies were allowed to operate freely, they exploited businesses and didn't protect consumers. Remember me reading you that excerpt from The Jungle where sausage manufacturers or meat packing plants were just letting anything go into their sausage. Well, the government wants to protect consumers from those fraudulent and deceptive business practices. Okay, there's a couple of different groups that will regulate the practices of businesses, like the Consumer Product Safety Commission, and then you have the Federal Trade Association, and then you have the Food and Drug Administration. These groups do things that ensure the safety of our products, our food, drugs, cosmetics, everywhere from cars to even how stocks are traded on the market, and to make sure that the advertising that manufacturers put on their products is legitimate. Okay. Another aspect of economic policy that deals with workers is labor management relations. In the 20th century, with the formation of labor unions, workers won economic protection under law. Unions have the power to collectively bargain. Collective bargaining involves workers organizing together to meet, discuss, and negotiate with the work conditions. Negotiate upon the working conditions, the benefits, and the wages with their employers. So, collective bargaining, the people that are collectively coming together are the workers and the business owners. Strikes. Strikes, of course, when labor management don't agree on negotiations for businesses or for wages and benefits, then the workers can strike. Strike means that you're halting production. It can hurt businesses if the workers aren't there. So it also can hurt our economy if a major industry is experiencing a strike, and that's when the government would get involved to try to negotiate bargaining between employers and workers.